The snowstorm outside painted the city in a haze of silver and silence. Wind pushed against the glass walls of the airport, howling like a restless ghost. Inside, the world was a different storm entirely. Crowds moving in frantic rhythm, the scent of coffee and travel anxiety thick in the air, voices layered over the hum of delay announcements. The monitors flickered with red text: canceled, delayed, postponed. No one was going anywhere tonight. Evelyn adjusted her oversized safety vest, the fluorescent orange reflecting under the cold airport lights. The floor shone where she had mopped it moments ago, though it would dull again soon under so many impatient feet. Her arms ached, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. In one arm she held her daughter, 5-year-old Sophie, her cheek flushed with fever, her breath warm and uneven against Evelyn's neck. The child whimpered softly, fingers clutching the collar of her mother's uniform. Evelyn whispered, her voice a soft melody drowned in the noise. "Just a little longer, baby. Mommy's got you." She searched the terminal for the small pharmacy kiosk she'd seen earlier. Her daughter's fever had risen and she needed medicine. The girl had been burning up since morning, and every step Evelyn took felt heavier. She wove through the crowd, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail that swung with each hurried step. Her uniform was clean but worn at the edges. The world around her didn't look. People brushed past without noticing the small figure with tired eyes and a sick child in her arms. Then, without warning, her shoulder collided with something solid. Her cleaning cart scraped against a briefcase. Sophie whimpered again. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, steadying her child. The man she'd bumped into turned sharply. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered quiet authority. His hair was dark, neatly styled, his posture straight, commanding. He looked at her with a cold, practiced composure, the kind carried by men who owned rooms without effort. He opened his mouth, ready to deliver a polite but distant reprimand until something in his gaze changed. Recognition. A flicker of something real. His expression softened for half a heartbeat. Then he blinked it away, mask returning, eyes unreadable once more. Evelyn's breath caught. Her voice trembled, barely a whisper. "Adrian?" He stopped mid-step. The name lingered in the air like a forgotten song. He didn't turn immediately. His shoulders stiffened. When he finally faced her, it was slow, hesitant, as though turning meant opening a door he'd locked long ago. His eyes met hers. Eyes she used to know like the sky, once filled with warmth, now clouded with something distant. He said nothing. Evelyn swallowed hard, holding Sophie closer, her voice fragile but steady. "Do you still remember me?" The question hung between them. For a long moment, neither moved. Around them, the airport kept its rhythm, people rushing, announcements echoing, the storm battering against the walls. But to them, everything fell quiet. Adrian's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the child in her arms, then back to her face. And in that instant she saw it. Memory. Pain. The faint trace of a smile that never reached his lips. He gave the smallest nod, barely visible, and then without a word turned and walked away. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart pounding. The crowd moved around her like a current. She wanted to call out to stop him, but her voice had left her. He was gone again, just as before. The years between them felt like ghosts now. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she was 19 again. Barefoot in the campus courtyard, her hair tangled by summer wind, her laughter echoing between brick walls. Adrian had been the boy with grease-stained hands and a shy smile, the one who fixed his old motorbike with borrowed tools behind the library, who carried a world of dreams in his rough palms. She was studying literature back then, chasing poetry and futures she couldn't quite define. They'd met over something small, a can of instant coffee he'd offered her one night during exam week. "It's cold," he'd said, scratching the back of his neck. "But it helps." It had helped more than he knew. They became inseparable after that. Nights on the campus steps, her reading Shakespeare out loud, him tracing her handwriting in the margins of her notebook. He'd told her about his dream, how one day he'd build something from the ground up, a company that mattered, a life where he wouldn't have to count every cent. She'd believed him, believed in him more than in anything else. Their world was small but enough. A dented kettle, half-shared notebooks, plans scribbled on receipts. He promised to take her to the coast one day, when things were better. She promised to wait, but life was cruel in quiet ways. When he got the offer, a full-time job in another city, she had smiled through tears. "Go," she'd said. "Just come back to me." He had kissed her like it was a promise, then left. She wrote him letters waiting. Weeks turned into months. Her mother disapproved from the start. "That boy will drag you down," she said. "You'll end up scrubbing floors while he chases illusions." Her mother's words became chains, sharp, heavy, relentless. Evelyn fought, but slowly exhaustion won. One night she wrote a letter of her own, a goodbye, trembling and unfinished. She left it at his apartment door, the rain beginning to fall. He never read it. That same night, a truck ran a red light and crushed his car. Adrian woke up days later in a hospital, his body broken. When he returned home, the letter was gone, lost to wind, to time, to fate. He thought she had left him without a word. She thought he had read her goodbye and agreed. And just like that, two lives drifted apart, each believing the other had let go. Now, years later, the storm outside mirrored the one within. The airport had turned into a sleepless village. Families camped out on mats, children curled up on suitcases. Evelyn sat in a quiet corner, Sophie's head resting on her lap, her fever finally easing. She stroked her daughter's hair, her thoughts a blur. Somewhere across the terminal, Adrian sat in a lounge, eyes fixed on nothing. He couldn't stop replaying that moment, the shock in her voice, the tremble in her question. He'd thought time had buried her memory beneath layers of work, meetings, and success. But one look, one accidental collision, and the ground had cracked open. He told himself it didn't matter, that the past was past, but he didn't believe it. He walked through the terminal aimlessly until he saw her again. She was trying to lift a heavy water jug onto a dispenser, her small frame straining under the weight. Before he could think, he stepped forward, took it from her hands, and replaced it effortlessly. "Let me," he said quietly. She startled. "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted softly, filling a small bottle. "It's still warm. She'll need it." Evelyn blinked, her throat tight. "Why would you?" He gave a faint, unreadable smile. "Someone once helped me like that. I didn't forget." He turned to leave, but a soft voice stopped him. "Mommy," Sophie murmured, sitting up. "Is that the man from your old picture?" The air froze. Evelyn's heart raced. Adrian paused mid-step, his back to them. He didn't answer. He didn't move. But the silence said everything. Then slowly he walked away, leaving Evelyn clutching the warm bottle, and the weight of a past she thought had burned out long ago. Hours passed. The storm howled louder, and in that frozen moment between departure gates and destiny, two souls, once lost to time, began to find their way back, through chance, through silence, through the fragile thread of memory that refused to break. The storm refused to let go. By midnight, the airport felt half asleep and half haunted, echoing with murmurs, laughter, and distant announcements of flights that would never leave tonight. Outside, wind tore through the runway lights like waves breaking on stone. Inside, Adrian sat at a coffee kiosk, his jacket draped over a chair, untouched espresso cooling beside him. He had tried to read his phone, scroll through the endless noise of work messages and news updates, but nothing registered. Every face that passed by became a blur except hers. Evelyn. The name itself felt like gravity, pulling him back to a life he had buried beneath ambition. Across the hall, she was sitting on a bench near the maintenance wing, arms wrapped around Sophie, trying to lull her to sleep. The lights above flickered, painting both mother and child in alternating shadows of gold and gray. Adrian couldn't look away. She looked different now, her face sharper, her movements cautious, her laughter replaced by quiet strength. But it was still her. The same softness in the way she brushed her daughter's hair aside. The same tender patience he remembered from those long campus nights. And the child, Sophie, she had his eyes. He didn't let that thought settle. He dismissed it almost angrily, but it stayed. Like a whisper he couldn't silence. Then, without thinking, he stood. He walked across the hall, every step slow, deliberate, as if each one carried the weight of years. "Evelyn," he said gently when he reached her. She looked up, startled. "Adrian," he nodded. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the air thick with unsaid words. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, glancing down at Sophie. "The storm isn't giving me much choice." Her lips curved faintly, tiredly. You always were stubborn. His response came like a whisper. So were you. There was silence again, but it wasn't empty this time. It hummed with memory, with longing and guilt. Adrian lowered himself onto the bench beside her, keeping a careful distance. She looks like you, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Evelyn's eyes flicked to her daughter, then away. She has my hair, she said. He waited. And her father? Evelyn hesitated. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, but years of silence had built walls that were hard to break. He's not in the picture. Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't press further. Outside, lightning flared, throwing their reflections against the window. For a brief instant, it looked like they were standing side by side, one family framed by the storm. Sophie stirred, her fevered voice breaking the fragile quiet. Mommy, water? Adrian was already on his feet before Evelyn could move. He fetched a bottle, poured it gently into a paper cup, and crouched beside the child. She blinked up at him with sleepy curiosity. You're kind, she murmured weakly. Adrian smiled, but it was filled with sadness. Your mom taught me that once. Evelyn's breath caught. She looked away, pretending to adjust Sophie's blanket. The moment felt too raw, too close to something she'd spent years running from. Why are you here, Adrian? She asked after a pause. He leaned back, exhaling. Business trip. Meeting investors. Flight was grounded. And you? Work, she said simply. I clean here sometimes. It's steady. He studied her, every word sinking like a stone. The girl who once dreamed of teaching poetry was now mopping airport floors in the dead of night. You deserved more, he said quietly. Her gaze met his, firm and unflinching. We don't always get what we deserve. Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the glass. She reached for her bag, digging through it for Sophie's medicine. But the small bottle wasn't there. Panic rippled across her face. I bought it earlier, she said, voice trembling. I must have. Adrian stood immediately. Stay here. Before she could protest, he disappeared into the maze of closed shops and dim corridors. The storm flickered light through the windows as he searched, scanning every corner, every lost and found desk, until finally he spotted the small pharmacy kiosk. The clerk was gone, but the counter was half open. He left a few bills on the counter, grabbed a new bottle of children's fever syrup, and ran back. When he returned, Evelyn's eyes widened. You didn't have to. I know, he interrupted again, breathless. But I wanted to. He handed her the medicine, his hands brushing hers for just a second too long. The warmth lingered between them. Thank you, she said softly, voice breaking. Adrian sat back down, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. He wanted to ask her everything. Why she left? Why she never called? What happened after he disappeared from her world? But every time he tried, the words dissolved. Instead, they sat there, two people bound by memories and silence, while the storm outside slowly began to fade. By dawn, the snow had stopped. The airport lights dimmed from harsh white to soft amber, painting the terminal in calm hues of morning. Sophie was sleeping soundly now, her fever breaking. Evelyn closed her eyes in quiet relief. Adrian looked at them, something fragile blooming in his chest. He didn't know what it was, hope maybe, or regret. Perhaps both. He rose to his feet, slipping his jacket off. Without a word, he draped it over Evelyn's shoulders. Adrian, she began. He shook his head. You need it more than I do. She looked up at him, and in that moment, the years fell away. They were young again, two dreamers on a campus bench, believing in forever. But forever had been stolen from them once. Adrian turned away, walking toward the large glass doors, the faint orange of sunrise glinting off his suit. He paused, glancing back one last time. Evelyn was watching him, her eyes glistening in the half-light. Goodbye, he said quietly. She didn't answer. She couldn't. He left. For a long time, Evelyn sat still, staring at the doorway he'd disappeared through. The jacket around her shoulders smelled faintly of his cologne, clean, warm, familiar. It felt like closure and heartbreak all at once, but as the day began, something inside her refused to rest. There was something in his eyes earlier, something unsaid, something that didn't match the man who walked away so easily. She picked up her phone. Her hands trembled as she searched his name. He wasn't just successful, he was everywhere. Magazine interviews, company profiles, charity events. And then one photo stopped her breath cold. Adrian standing at a ribbon-cutting ceremony beside a plaque that read, "The Sophie Foundation, in memory of my daughter." Her world blurred. She looked at her sleeping child, tears burning her eyes. Adrian had lost a daughter named Sophie. Her mind raced, piecing together the look in his eyes, the hesitation when he saw her child. He hadn't asked because he was afraid of believing what he saw. She clutched the jacket closer. The storm might have stopped, but a different kind of storm had just begun. Evelyn didn't sleep. The hum of the airport faded into white noise as her thoughts spiraled. Her phone screen glowed faintly in the early morning light. The article still open before her. The Sophie Foundation. In memory of my daughter. Adrian's daughter. A child he'd lost. A name he'd never stopped carrying. She looked at her own Sophie, sleeping peacefully beside her. The small rise and fall of her chest a fragile reminder that life was both cruel and merciful. What were the odds? What kind of twist of fate brought a man who mourned a Sophie to meet another Sophie, or hers? The more she thought about it, the more impossible it felt to let him go again. She stood, pulling Adrian's jacket tighter around her shoulders, inhaling the faint trace of him still clinging to the fabric. Her heart beat fast as she whispered, "I can't lose him again." Outside, dawn spilled across the glass walls, washing the runway in pale gold. Planes were starting to board, the storm finally surrendering to a calm sky. Evelyn gathered her things quietly, lifted Sophie into her arms, and moved through the thinning crowd, her eyes scanning every direction. She didn't have to look long. Adrian was standing near gate 14, his carry-on beside him, ticket in hand, face unreadable. He looked exhausted, not from the sleepless night, but from the kind of battle that happens inside a man's chest. His flight number echoed through the speakers, a final call. She walked toward him, every step heavy with fear and longing. When she reached him, her voice barely made it past her lips. "Adrian," he turned. And in that moment, the entire world fell silent. Her eyes glistened, her breath uneven. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. He frowned faintly. "Tell you what?" "That you lost a daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "Her name, Sophie." His hand froze around the handle of his luggage. His face went pale. He didn't answer, didn't need to. His silence was louder than words. "I read about it," she continued softly. "Last night, I saw the photo. The foundation. I didn't know, Adrian. I didn't know you went through that kind of pain." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago. But not to you," she said. "You still carry her. I saw it in your eyes the moment you saw my Sophie." He looked away, his throat working as he swallowed hard. "She was 5. A drunk driver ran a red light. I was supposed to pick her up that day, but I got caught in a meeting. By the time I got there," his voice cracked, the words crumbling in the space between them, "I never forgave myself." Evelyn's heart broke at the sound. She wanted to reach for him, to pull him into the kind of embrace that said everything words couldn't. But he stood like a man made of glass, fragile and dangerous to touch. "She had your eyes," Evelyn whispered. He smiled bitterly. "That's what everyone said." Sophie stirred in her arms then, blinking sleepily. "Mommy?" Adrian's gaze softened immediately. He crouched down instinctively, unable to help himself. "Hey there, little one," he said gently. Sophie looked at him curiously, then smiled, the kind of innocent, pure smile that only children can give. "You look sad," she said. Adrian blinked, caught off guard. "Do I?" She nodded seriously. "But it's okay. Mommy says people smile again when they're loved." The words struck him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Evelyn froze, tears stinging her eyes. For a moment, none of them spoke. Adrian swallowed hard, then looked up at Evelyn. "You always taught people how to find the right words," he murmured, even when they didn't know they needed them. Evelyn's voice trembled. Maybe some words were meant to find their way back. He stood slowly, the air between them charged with everything they never said. His flight was now boarding, the announcement echoing like a countdown. "I should go," he said finally. Her heart sank. "Adrian," he hesitated, looking at her one last time. "Evelyn, when I woke up in that hospital after the accident, I thought I'd lost everything. My child, my reason. And then I convinced myself it was safer not to feel again, because feeling meant breaking. He paused, his eyes glistening. But then last night you walked back into my life, and suddenly I'm not sure if I've been living all these years or just waiting. She stepped closer. Then don't walk away again. He looked at her for a long, trembling second. If I stay, I don't know if I can handle losing anyone ever again. Then don't lose us, she whispered. The words hung between them, raw and desperate, and then, for the first time in years, Adrian let go of fear. He reached out slowly, hesitantly, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, her breath shuddering. I thought you stopped loving me, he whispered. I never did, she said. I just stopped believing you'd come back. Tears welled in his eyes. I did, just too late. She smiled through her tears. No, you're here. That's enough. The intercom crackled again, calling his name for the final boarding. He looked toward the gate, then back at her, the choice written plainly on his face. A life of plans and meetings waiting in one direction, a life of love and unfinished stories standing in the other. He let the boarding call fade into silence. Adrian dropped his ticket into the nearest trash bin, exhaling as if shedding years of weight. Then he turned fully to her, his expression breaking into the softest, most honest smile she'd seen since they were kids. Then maybe, he said quietly, it's time I came home. Evelyn's hand trembled as he reached for it. When their fingers met, it felt like every moment of the past had led to this one breath, this one heartbeat. Sophie giggled softly, watching them with wide, innocent eyes. Are you my daddy? She asked suddenly. Evelyn froze. Adrian blinked, stunned, then knelt down again, his voice shaking. No, sweetheart, he said carefully. But I'd like to be someone who makes sure you and your mom never feel alone again. Sophie tilted her head. Like a hero, he smiled. Something like that. Evelyn laughed softly through her tears, the sound fragile but real. She looked down at him, her voice full of the warmth she'd buried for too long. You always did have a way with promises. And this time, he said, standing, I'll keep them. The storm had passed completely now. Outside the glass, the sky stretched wide and endless, painted in shades of gold and soft blue. People began to board their planes, life moving forward as it always does. But for the three of them standing in the quiet of Gate 14, time stood still, caught in a moment that felt like forgiveness. Adrian wrapped his coat around Evelyn and Sophie, his arms strong, steady, warm. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt safe. Not because the world had changed, but because the ache in her heart finally had a place to rest. Sophie leaned against them, her voice sleepy but sure. Mommy, she whispered, I told you he was the man from your stories. Evelyn smiled, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. You did, baby. You really did. Adrian looked between them, emotion flooding his face. What stories? Evelyn's eyes glimmered. The ones I used to tell her at night. About a boy who built dreams with his hands. About how love can survive even when everything else falls apart. He smiled faintly. Did they have a happy ending? Her voice softened. They do now. And with that, the three of them walked toward the exit, leaving behind the noise, the past, the grief, stepping into a new morning where hope was not just a word, but a promise reborn. Outside, the world glowed gold. Snow melted into soft puddles on the pavement. The air smelled of rain and renewal. Adrian took Evelyn's hand again, intertwining his fingers with hers as they crossed into the light. And for the first time in forever, both of them believed not in perfect endings, but in new beginnings that felt just as beautiful. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive when you expect it. It returns when you need it most.